Do you think that war is inevitable between China and the United States? Because the United States is not going to stop. I tell everybody she is not going to stop. She may rebrand it, but she's not going to stop. And how long does America think that she will be able to supply the Chinese province of Chinese Taipei, or for those who don't know, Taiwan, with weapons and antagonize mainland China before they provoke a military and economic response?
Very good question. And I mean, of course, I bet everything. And I hope I'm wrong and I can shut down my channel. But if I'm wrong, I will shut down my channel and I'll never do another video. I guarantee you that under the Trump administration, this drive to continue promoting separatism on Taiwan against America's own agreements with Beijing and in contravention of international law, they will continue this. But I want people to realize that their goal is not to protect Taiwan. They couldn't care less about Taiwan, the people who live there, infrastructure, the economy. They don't care about that. They're going to do to Taiwan what they've done to Ukraine. The goal was never for Ukraine to ever beat Russia. It was to raise the cost as high as possible to help overextend Russia as much as possible, fighting them to the last Ukrainian. And we can see that that is exactly what has happened in Ukraine. They never had a chance. They were never going to win. It was all about overextending Russia. And to a certain extent, it did extend Russia, which is all the more reason they're going to try to do this vis-a-vis China through Taiwan. They admit in their policy papers that Taiwan will be a pile of cinders when this is all done. There will be no economy. There will be no infrastructure. The population there will be devastated. They know this is going to happen. They're even more determined to do it because they know otherwise, inevitably, Taiwan will fully reunify with the rest of China. It's inevitable because it only makes sense. They are Chinese people. They speak Chinese. They're from mainland China. It is internationally recognized as part of China. I don't know if people realize that, but it is. It's even recognized as part of China by the US, even though they completely betray that agreement and that recognition. Their economy is already integrated with the rest of China. If they were to become independent from China, their economy would disappear almost overnight. There's no way for the US and all of its proxies in the region or around the world to substitute the type of economic opportunities the rest of China offers Taiwan. And that only increases year to year. And people living in Taiwan, I think they know this. I think they understand this. So yes, there will be war. And again, it all comes down to people like Secretary Rubio saying, we don't want war with China. All they have to do is accept that we're going to carve Taiwan off out from their borders. All they have to do is accept we're going to put more and more. I don't know if people know this, there are US troops on Taiwan right now. US recognizes it as Chinese territory. They have US troops occupying it. They will put more troops there. They will turn it into a forward operating base right off the coast of the rest of China. So that is what they're going to do unless China stops them. China is patient. They're not concerned with being humiliated by the US. The US humiliates China every opportunity it gets to try to provoke some sort of conflict. China is patient, and unless something drastic happens, they will try to avoid war. But they are prepared to go to war if the US leaves them no option. So that is what we will watch the US do. It was done all during the first Trump administration, all throughout the Biden administration, and it will continue under this current administration. Everything will be done possible to try to provoke a war with China sooner rather than later, because later China will only be that much stronger and better able to overpower the US in any sort of conflict. The other thing I want to warn people about is that the US isn't really preparing to fight China head on over Taiwan. Taiwan is just a pretext to start a conflict. Their real plan is to implement a global maritime blockade on all Chinese shipping. China has a powerful military, but it is confined to China and its surrounding area. If the US begins, say, I don't know, seizing the Panama Canal, just for example, someone might have been talking about that recently, or the Suez Canal, or the South China Sea even, or the Arctic, off the coast of Greenland, maybe. China does not have the ability to project military power to break these blockades. And I want to point out that even though this is something that President Trump has talked about all along, he's extremely anti-China. And even though he and his supporters called President Biden Beijing Biden, it was during the Biden administration that the U.S. Marine Corps was completely reorganized into an anti-shipping force. In other words, they were an expeditionary force that had air power, land power, sea power. They were basically a Swiss Army knife force. They could do anything, anywhere. They completely stripped those capabilities away, and they created a force that solely exists to interdict shipping. So they're again, step by step, administration to administration, they're putting all the pieces together on the board to prepare for this conflict with China, which will be provoked either between the Philippines and China or Taiwan and the rest of China. And that will be the pretext the U.S. uses to implement a maritime blockade worldwide. And so that's what China knows is going to happen. This is why they've invested so much in the Belt and Road Initiative. But in reaction to that, the U.S. has invested millions of dollars over many years to attack and undermine the Belt and Road Initiative. So it is a war that is already taking place. It's just happening through hybrid methods, and it's just a matter of time before it becomes more direct. As the U.S. becomes more desperate, the chances of it becoming more direct increase. Just like this conflict in Ukraine, we saw the U.S. and Europe get more and more involved as Ukrainian forces got weaker and weaker. And so this is and again, have to remember that they're going after Russia specifically to isolate China. A maritime blockade trying to cut off resources to China doesn't work if Russia is right on their border and able to supply hydrocarbons and other raw materials to China's wartime economy. So they have to strip Russia away, isolate China for this to work. This is why they're doing it. This is the big picture. And when you understand this big picture and all the pieces that have to work together in combination, and you see how each administration has worked seamlessly to advance this big picture, then you can see through the partisan rhetoric, the left-right nonsense that is used to divide and distract people from the truth, that at election time they have no choice. This is an agenda that's going to continue, and it's going to come at the expense of the American people. You began by talking about tariffs. Who's going to pay the price for these tariffs? It's going to be the American people through cost of living.
Yeah, and Brian, like with the war, when it breaks out, have those leaders in Washington D.C. and London, Brussels, thought about if China just embargoes them? Because 95% of all goods in the United States come from China. A huge portion in Europe comes from China. In the event of the war and China calls the dead end, and then China embargoes the United States within a week, all of the shelves are empty, and then you have to deal with massive unemployment because the businesses are shuttering, no transiting of goods. So now you have trucking, train, and cargo shutting down, more debt, and then you have defaults on bank loans, which means the banks then eventually go belly up. So now we're talking about a domino effect that will almost certainly kill the U.S. economy because it's already spiraling out of control. Have they taken that into consideration when they're thinking about antagonizing Russia and China, and specifically and especially the Chinese, because of the economic and political leverage that they truly hold over the United States? I don't think that they realize that America is not the America of 40 years ago, and China is not the China of 40 years ago. What do you say about that?
These are all really good points. Again, with the tariffs, the whole point of the tariffs is not to rebalance trade. I think Carl Zai, I don't know if it was on your show or somewhere else, he says a lot of really smart things. And one thing he said was that if the U.S. really wanted to rebalance trade and make it fair or make it more even, they wouldn't be banning China from buying in entire categories of goods and products. China cannot buy enough American microchips, for example, or graphic processor units. They can't get enough of these. They would buy as many as they could from the United States, and they would pay a premium price for it. They're happy to give their money to the U.S., and they're happy that the U.S. can supply this to them. They're not looking to undermine the U.S. position in this regard. But because the U.S. is not trying to balance trade, they're trying to contain and handicap China, stop its growth, stunt it, and contain it. That is why they're going to ban them from buying these products. That's what this is really about. And so the tariffs are not to rebalance trade. The tariffs are to decouple from China, because just as you said, if there was a war right now, it would be devastating for the US and Europe, although the US really doesn't care about Europe. They're proxies and they're expendable. But it would devastate the US, and the US isn't really sure that they would come out on top at this point. So the point of the tariffs is to begin a permanent decoupling. They're not looking to negotiate anything with China in the long term. They're looking to permanently decouple from China, and that is to prepare for war with China. So that is the whole point of it. And it's very convenient for the US and the corporations that drive foreign policy. That's going to be the American people that pay the price for this. Now just think about it. Think about what Trump and Biden have done with these tariffs and the cost of living crisis that continues to expand. And look at how Americans are viewing it and reacting to it. They're blaming each other and they're blaming China. The one thing they're not blaming are the people in Washington as a whole, as a group, and the interests behind them. That's the one thing they're not blaming, and they never will see through it, because again, it was a strategy of tension to divide and distract them from the truth and from getting together on common ground. They're too busy talking about men using women's bathrooms. They're too busy arguing over these things, and they don't see the real issue that is going to shred their country and destroy their livelihood. I mean, the livelihood of Americans is under threat first and foremost by Washington and Wall Street, not China, not by a long shot, not by a million years.